You're listening to The Sustainable Act with Smiley Krana, a podcast about the environment, social impact, and culture. Each episode, we discuss issues, solutions, and how you can become more sustainable in life and work. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and follow the show. Enjoy! Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. Today I'm chatting with the super duper, very inspiring sustainability champion, Emellie O'Brien, whose name you may have heard as she is a pioneer of the sustainable filmmaking movement. After her sustainability leadership on The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and it being acclaimed as quote unquote the most eco-friendly blockbuster in Sony Pictures history, she founded Earth Angel in 2013 to expand her expertise and impact. Earth Angel's slogan, which I absolutely love, is making movies without a mess. Emellie is based in Brooklyn, New York, but her company serves productions all over the United States and work with major motion pictures and television series. And we're talking about major productions, including Black Panther, The Avengers, and Ghostbusters. Emellie, welcome to the show. I'm so grateful to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
This is so amazing because we've been talking for a couple, maybe a couple months now, and every time I talk to you, I'm so inspired and I feel so hopeful for the future. And just I guess you just have this persona where I feel like, because this can be such a this whole movement can be so depressing at times when you constantly hear about the world and what's happening, the waste that even our film industry is contributing to. And so just talking to people like you makes me feel so hopeful and positive.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for folks kind of banding together to support one another in these efforts, because it can feel lonely and it can feel like you're kind of pushing a boulder up a mountain sometimes. So yeah, I think the more we can lean on one another and provide that inspiration, the quicker we're going to reach these very ambitious goals.
Yeah, and we were just talking about it just this morning before recording this. Yeah, it can get lonely, but also there's no competition in this movement, right? And so we're all here to just support each other for one common goal, and that's our planet.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so seeing all the different stakeholders and groups really kind of get behind this movement over the past decade or so has been really, really inspiring, and how everyone has a different role to play, whether you're talent or catering or a studio executive, right? Each of us can contribute to making this industry more sustainable.
Yes, I love that so much, and I so agree with that because that's something I heard so much through my experience of coordinating sustainable practices is, oh, my actions don't matter, or what I do isn't going to contribute to the bigger picture, or or just having this expectation that it's all on the sustainability coordinator on set to make it happen. But in reality, it was every single person doing what they can in their department because they know what their job is and what they can do better than anyone else. So definitely agree with that. But I wanted to ask you how you are before we get into all of this, because with the whole COVID and just this stressful time and just what's happening in the States, how are you?
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm doing well, all things considered. It's definitely been a turbulent year, as it has for many. And I think like most people, really just trying to see find the light, find the opportunity, find the silver linings. And I think for us and for Earth Angel, it was really about taking the pause of our productions being shut down for 6 months straight to reflect on how we can improve. And, obviously we try to solve pain points at Earth Angel, any of the challenges around sustainability, whether that's cost, whether that's logistics, whether that's behavioral education. There's a lot of different pain points when it comes to implementing new systems into the circus that is production.
Mm-hmm.
And so with COVID, we knew that there were going to be new pain points and new challenges. And for a lot of people, sustainability was definitely a back burner element throughout the course of production. And now we knew that for some, we risked it being even more back burner. Like maybe it's not even on the burner anymore. It's nowhere near the stove. And so we knew we had to kind of connect the dots between what was happening with this pandemic and the absolute devastating ecological collapse that we're all facing and the humanitarian crisis as a result. So we created a clean and green service element that's just about sort of addressing both the COVID compliance elements and the sustainability elements. And so my team worked really hard on that and bringing together a lot of the different vendors who were also facing these challenges of how do I adapt my services to be COVID compliant. And I think seeing everyone in the production industry is just like so resilient. If there's a challenge, we rise to meet it. And seeing that happen with all these different production vendors and suppliers and kind of galvanizing everyone around this common goal of like, okay, we need production to come back. So obviously we need these safety measures in place, but we also need to make sure that we're coming back even more sustainably than we were before, right? Like we're not rolling back here. We're raising the bar where we can. And so a lot of people responded to that, and we got this great vendor network partnership going, and additional health and safety training implemented. We brought on a public health specialist to guide us through that. So it was a learning curve for sure, but out of it, we made some really great strides, and the productions were really grateful and are all the more resilient for it.
That's so inspiring, just to like learn about like how you went through this time as we all did, where we were all confused and lost and didn't know what was happening and had to adapt to this new world, but you came out of that with like a new strategy, a new plan, and a new way of like incorporating sustainability with health. And I think like those two work hand in hand, right? COVID safety and just in general, like safety and health with sustainability, because like at the end of the day, like, why are we trying to be sustainable? It's so we can continue living on this planet. We need to take care of ourselves and the home we are in. And so that like is so cool that like your company evolved that way and just like figured out how to make it work. And I think that's something that's like a common thing too, where why people felt like sustainability is now put on the back burners, because they always saw it as an addition or this extra like layer, versus like integrating it within their model. And you presenting this like way of making it easy, making it simple, and integrating both like COVID safety practices as well as sustainable production, definitely I think sparks like more interest and like with people, because they're not like feeling more overwhelmed or stressed, because I think everyone was already feeling overwhelmed with all these changes. So that's really cool that you did that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about easy, seamless integration. That's really what we're all about, is being a translator, acting as a translator really, of how do we take sustainability and easily translate it into the language of production. And the customization of knowing that each production is very different, personalities are very different, the approach, there is no one size fits all solution here. The approach varies on a case by case basis.
So I was reading about you on your website and like just trying to learn about your story, but also just like through our past conversations. So I wanted to know like how like you started Earth Angel, because it's so inspiring. And you started out as a film student, right, at NYU. Can you talk about that, like just kind of your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I studied film at NYU because I wanted to help create socially and environmentally conscious content. So I minored in producing, and I did some internships with documentary companies, and I was just really motivated by leveraging this really powerful medium to accelerate positive social environmental change. And I graduated out of the industry. I started working at Focus Features back when they had their home office in New York. And that was where I started to work on the Focus on Green initiative. And I started to learn about all these different, new and emerging sustainable production elements. So this was right when sort of PGA Green came to be founded and the Green Production Guide was first started. And then I also learned about an organization called Film Biz Recycling, which was a prop house reuse center based out of Brooklyn, where productions could donate props, set decoration, wardrobe, etc. And then they would sell it back as a, sort of thrift store model, but then also they donated a lot to local nonprofits and community partners. And so they hosted this conversation on how productions were now hiring environmental stewards, eco coordinators, sustainability managers, everyone calls it a different thing, but there was now a dedicated person on sets to monitor a production's environmental impact and reduce it. And I was like, hold the phone. How do I do this? And what was really funny though was that the people who were on the panel talking about their experience having done this were all talking about how miserable it was. Everyone was like, this is the worst job in the world. You take away people's plastic water bottles and they hate you, and you're sorting through trash all day, and it's miserable. And I just sat there thinking, like, I want to do this. I want to do this like seemingly really miserable thing. There has to be a better way. How do I do this? So through my network at Focus Features, I got connected to the wonderful Peter Seraf of Big Beach Films, and he hired me to green his set. And it was my first experience doing it. It was a whirlwind. I got a lot of angry resistance at first, because this was when it was really brand new to a lot of people. But then I also got a lot of respect and encouragement. And that was actually the set where I got the nickname Earth Angel. The crew members started to call me that on walkie-talkie, and then that was it. It was my name. It stuck.
That's so cute.
Yeah, it was one of the nicer names. There were some not nice names too. But then it just really grew organically from that experience. So other producers called me and said, hey, I heard what you did on this set. Can you come do it on my set? And I knew that it wasn't enough for me as one individual to be greening one set at a time, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's not going to create the large systemic change that we need to see to accelerate our industry toward a net zero carbon industry. So I started Earth Angel because I wanted to create a more sustainable model, I guess, for sustainability. And so we wanted to kind of take all this historical knowledge and of what I had learned through my onset experience, bring in other experts from our team and staff, and other sustainability frameworks, and create this model and train and educate more eco PAs to be out in the field and providing this service. And the rest is history. Here I am 7 years later.
Yeah. So what year was this, like when you had your first feature or like first job as an environmental steward?
2011 was my first time greening a set, and then I founded Earth Angel in 2013.
So that's amazing because it's 2021 now, and it's been 7 years almost, or well, since 2011 it's been longer, 10 years, 10 years, math. And it's so cool, like just seeing like how long you've been dedicated to this and how much more work we still have to do, but like it's like a slow progression, right? It's like slow and steady, and it's so cool that you thought about how to make a greater impact by multiplying Emellies around the states. And it's just so cool, like so inspiring. And also, like, you were a film student that decided like there needs to be a change and you want to be that change, and that is also so inspiring because like I resonate a lot with that story as well, because it really goes to show like you don't need 10 years of experience with like a master's degree in environmental education to like be able to make a change, like because there's always that kind of like hesitation or that kind of and I'm not, maybe not always, but sometimes I get that too, where it's like, oh, I don't have a degree in environmental sciences, or I don't have like 20 years of experience in the industry, so like, will my voice really matter? And so I have those days too, and it's just so cool like to hear stories like yours where it's like you were just like a kid with this like goal in mind and you went out and made changes, and 10 years later here you are growing your company bigger.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, the way I sort of identify is I was sort of an intrapreneur turned entrepreneur in a way. And,
define entrepreneur. What do you mean by that?
Sure. Entrepreneurs are sort of people who work within organizations to try to enact big structural changes. So you could be a crew member on a film set, you could be a manager at a company, but you're trying to evolve that particular business towards a more socially, environmentally conscious business values and code of conduct, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that to me, it was really about, I had this experience of being trained on how to be a producer, working on set, understanding production culture and the mindset really well. And so when I created Earth Angel, though, I knew we needed to supplement these other skill sets. So I brought on, team members with environmental policy degrees and different zero waste certification schemes. We're constantly sort of growing and diverse representation of experiences, skill sets, knowledge, background, because it's not me doing this on my own in a silo. It's a lot of different voices and a lot of different education background folks coming in and giving us these new ideas so that we can constantly iterate and innovate on our model. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right in that we all have a role to play. We should all feel empowered regardless of where we come from and what our experience is. And I think to that point as well, involving all these different
Absolutely.
experiences is so important too.
No, for sure. Because like those that are studying this, like we need those people too, because like you're actually doing the study behind this, and what you contribute is like as equal as like somebody that's like on the grounds working and that experience too. So I love that just that company, like I guess vision, or just like kind of standard you have, like just that mentality around bringing in a diverse group of like experiences. That's so important for like all companies to recognize that, to look at where this person's coming from and how they can contribute greater to your company. And I guess that's more on the business side too, but like I'm sure it's like very, very helpful to have that for your team as well, because that way you're growing. And like we talked about this morning as well, about how just like technology is always evolving and changing, and we're adapting to it. Same thing with like the climate movement and sustainability, and just like the practices on set, and especially now in this COVID world, like we all just like it just switched like 180. It changed on us of how we act and behave and work. And it's similar to this too, like how do we integrate sustainable practices and who we bring on in the team to like share that and work with us. And so yeah, all contributes to the bigger picture.
Definitely.
How did you, I mean, you did talk about this, like you touched point about this, but you said that you wanted to create like eco-conscious films or projects, like when you went into school. Like, how did you learn about the environment? Like, when did that interest spark, when you learned about, or your passion for this began and you're like, this is what I want to do, or this is kind of what I'm interested in about the environment movement?
Yeah, so a couple of different milestones in my environmentalist journey. I think first and foremost, it started for me in Girl Scouts. I was one of those kids who was probably in Girl Scouts like longer than most kids were in Girl Scouts for. But, that leave no trace mentality, protecting our environment, being good stewards to the planet, to the community, those values were just instilled in me at a young age. And then I think when I started to really identify more as an activist, one of the huge inspirations I look to is actually the movie Erin Brockovich. I love that movie. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. And seeing the story of this woman who had no background in policy or environmental science, completely come in and advocate for this community that had been devastated by corporate pollution, right, was just so moving to me. And I think speaks to the power of, again, our medium and our industry, right? Like we can tell these stories. Like people don't think of Erin Brockovich as being a climate related story, but it is, it absolutely is. And where we can embed these storytelling aspects around how we all need to be better stewards of this earth and hold big corporations accountable for the fact that they're the major contributors to global greenhouse gas emissions. Like we need this awareness and folks to be understanding of it. So that was kind of where I think the activist seed was planted for me, and then it really started to grow in college. And when I was at NYU, I met so many different incredibly political organizers and community organizers, and I just knew that I had to, whatever I was going to do with my film degree, I had to make the world better, right? I couldn't just make films for the sake of making films, or content for the sake of making content. It was, for me, it was all about, we are inheriting this crisis of just vast consequence. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to change it? So yeah, that was kind of how my environmental journey sort of started and evolved.
That's so amazing. Such a beautiful story too, because that's like like that point you just made about like you don't want to just make films for the sake of making films, and like how do you integrate this? And it's so like even like all our filmmaker friends that are listening to this episode right now, like you don't have to make a film about climate narrative like or about the climate crisis, but like how you tell that story really matters. What you put into that story and where you're shooting, how you're treating the like people and the land, and like all that really matters and plays a huge part in like the bigger picture. And so just like having those core values and that understanding of like your own impact and the film impact that you're leaving behind on this planet, it's so important. So it's so amazing that you learned that, like realized that early on, and how you shaped your career based off that. And I only hope more people understand that too, like even people that have been working in the industry for like decades and feel like, oh well, this is how I've been doing it my whole life, like there's no way I can change. But you can, right? Once you recognize like what can you do. And I think even that like goes such a long way, where it's like trying to think about like how can you change the world, just realize that, like trying to understand how can you change your own actions to contribute better. And like if everybody thinks that way, we can change the world easily.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So yeah, you talked about, I want to talk about the name Earth Angel, and you did mention that like that was like a nickname you got on set. It's so catchy and cute, and I guess like that's why you like stuck with that for your company name.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you can relate, when you're on set and someone starts to call you something over the walkie, it's very hard to be called anything differently. And so, yeah, it was a name that people like people didn't know my real name. Like they only knew me as Earth Angel. And
Wow.
even, well, this is pre-COVID, of course, because I can't just waltz on the set anymore. But when I would go and visit our sets, even as someone who isn't physically on set as frequently anymore, and I'd see someone from a show I worked on several years ago, they're like, "Hey, Earth Angel," like it was the name. So it
Yeah.
was no brainer for me when it was like, what are we going to call the company? It made sense to, we already had this built-in brand recognition, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Well, your name is like starts with E and Earth, so I guess it can. There's like sort of that common thing. I know I've been called like a lot of nicknames too, just like different ones for like green. But yeah, it was different. Luckily, I had such a positive and nice crew that I wasn't called like I didn't get a lot of like hate or anything, because I know that is like a huge thing, because I totally like empathize with that, because there were like times where there's like conflict of interest or resistance. And even if it wasn't on my show in particular, there's still like people in the industry that are feeling so adamant and strong about like their own thoughts and like just opinions and like this whole movement and what we're doing and stuff, where it's like it's so hard to like understand like why I think that way. But and it's so unfortunate that like sometimes you get the worst of these people just because you're trying to do the right thing or you're just trying to do your job.
Absolutely. And I understand where people are coming from. Crew members are under immense pressure.
Yeah.
They work really long days. They often work in really extreme weather conditions. Script changes happen and all the work they did is thrown out the window, and they're now have to adjust for that. It's demanding, it's grueling. And, I think, because of that, though, there's also this real sort of like insider camaraderie culture as well. That's sort of like, oh, you're a survivor. You got through that mega production with 3 weeks of overnights, like, you know, there's a level of respect that, you know, comes into that culture and kind of crew psychology as well. So it's really about understanding that if you're getting pushback, it's often really not about
Yeah,
what
you.
what what you're
Yeah.
proposing at all. It's about the fact that script changes just came out and now they're in a frenzy to to meet these new demands or deliver the budget, you know, their episodic budget, whatever it is. So just coming, we always try to come at our approaches, meet people where they are. Some people, this is still really foreign to them. Some people are zero waste champions and they're like, why are you trying to explain to me how to compost? And we're like, oh, sorry. Okay. You know, so it
Yeah.
it's definitely something that you have to gauge.
Yeah. So what do you do? What are some things that you do or like your company does, like when you're on set and you have like people working right with you and to keep kind of the atmosphere more positive and light, like and not being like the, I guess I've been called the green police a lot of times, but in a fun, lighthearted way. But I guess using that, like not being like considered the green police, but being just like somebody that's helping and guiding. And how do you keep the the environment, like play on words, atmosphere light and positive, bringing on these changes?
Totally. So, you know, positive reinforcement goes a really long way. We were very early adopters to the Green Crew Member Program Award. And it really sort of kicked off for me on the set of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. And we started this Green Crew Member of the Week program. And they would get this certificate and some kind of like fun gift, you know, of some sort, and some movie tickets, some swag, some whatever it is. And actually, I was on a set once where Lucy Liu sponsored the Green Crew Member of the Week award and gave out $100 gift cards every
Oh my
week. So
God.
that was pretty awesome too. But yeah, where you can really spotlight the people who are championing this and doing
Yeah.
amazing work, right? Rather than like shaming or blaming maybe one
Yeah.
who's receptive. I think that goes a long way. And I think similarly, really just like showing people that you're not just there to tick boxes and be on your way, you know, that you're a part of this crew. We, you know, we refer to ourselves as the eco department. You know, we're not just a person of one. We are, you know, there's a team backing our eco PAs on all of our shows. And we're here to support, you know, like if you're having trouble figuring out how the cost analysis of implementing a sustainable product is going to work, let's talk about that. Where can we step in? You know, if you need to do some additional research to find out, is this a best approach, let's step in. So it's really about reinforcing that we are not here to like point fingers and tell you what to do. We are here to guide and support every step of the way. And some folks embrace that and others don't. I think that's just the nature of personalities.
Everything.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
You
but
find
it
that
goes
everywhere.
a long way.
That's so awesome. I love that. Yeah, and like this is yeah, so you mentioned the Amazing Spider-Man 2 and I wanted to talk about that because it's in my talking points. Because this is kind of like what started like I guess the whole movement or like you know, Earth Angel began shortly after you worked on that show. And I remember watching this video at Sony Pictures posted of the work you did, and it was so inspiring, Emellie. Like I remember watching it even though this video came out in like 2013, 14. I was just like I'd been working on my show since like January. Then we had the 5-month hiatus, and coming back, there were so many days where I felt so like I just was like giving up because I was like, what's the point of this? And like, am I doing anything right? And I just came across that video. I don't know how I stumbled across it like online, and I think I've seen it like before years ago, but rewatched it and it was like the universe just sent it to me, and I was so inspired just seeing like how you know you kept the set positive and the amazing like results that came from like all the efforts you put in there. And it's so cool that they showed the BTS. Like I'll definitely link it for anyone listening because that's also important too, right? Like action inspires action. So I love that they like filmed that process. But what were some of the key practices that you implemented on set and like how effective were they?
Yeah, great question. And also, yeah, quick plug for Sony for putting together that video because they did invest marketing dollars in putting that together. And I think it has become something that a lot of other productions look to as a case study example. And also the fact that we're using our medium to promote this work, right? Like this is a medium all of us love. We work in it, we embrace it. So we need to be using it more, I think, to
Yes.
creating more content around how productions can embrace this.
Yeah, because like if I was just sitting in my office one day and I watched that video and suddenly I've like this, spark of positivity and just, I guess, reinforcement, just like encouragement, like sparked in me. Like how many other people have like sat down and watched that video and felt like hopeful and like went and did some work or contributed to the greater good. Like it's just so cool that ripple effect it can have just
Absolutely.
years later.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think some hallmarks of the Amazing Spider-Man 2 were, we had really supportive department heads. So, like for example, our production designer was Mark Friedman, and he's a really big advocate for sustainable production. And we repurposed a lot of material because there was a ton of builds that we did, and really took strong emphasis on that. The whole Times Square sequence, we used shipping containers to do a lot of the main construction around, so saving the need for bringing in additional lumber and putting up the green screen around the shipping containers, for example. We had a really robust zero waste program on set too, a ton of food recovery because we had scenes with hundreds and hundreds of extras, and like the Peter Parker graduation scene, for example. And that too was probably the highest number of extras I've ever worked with on a single day on a show. And we did that peak summer. And we did it without any plastic water bottles. And it took like communication with the UPM and craft services. And we came up with this whole like water station strategy, protocols, set medics were involved because everyone was concerned about heat stroke, and whatnot. So it just really speaks to when you have a UPM, a line producer, and department heads who are game, who are on board. And obviously you need to take the added steps during pre-production to create a sound logistics strategy. It can be a very doable process. It's like anything in production, it's all about planning.
Yeah, no, and that really goes to show like just like to understand how much work goes into like planning one day's worth of water like situation. Like I know like we dealt with water problems all the time on my show, especially coming back from the COVID lockdown because safety was concerned. And like we like and even with backgrounds actors, like coordinating even with the background like casting agent to like make sure they communicate with their actors to like that there won't be plastic bottles on set, and like figuring out like solutions for when people are like thirsty and angry and hot. And so like that also like just that one point you made, like it goes to show how much work goes into like prepping each single day and like putting out fires like that. And also yeah, like just having the support of your production team, the department heads, the producer, like PM, it's also so important too. So I love that. And I like the sea can container method you guys use too to like store. That's like very smart as well. And do you know like on top of your head how much you ended up saving on the show, like for money or CO2 or like emissions or?
Yeah, actually, this figure got put in the Hollywood Reporter. There's a Hollywood Reporter article about this. But yeah, because of the material donations alone, because of how many builds and how much set decoration was involved with this production, we calculated they saved about $400,000.
Amazing.
Over,
That's so much money.
yeah, and it's a blockbuster, right?
Yeah.
So it's a big budget show. I think the savings proportion to budget is a factor to look
Yeah,
at, right?
definitely.
Like one of our smaller budget shows, like high maintenance, won't necessarily see that level of savings that a Spider-Man saw. So it's all relative, but yeah, it was substantial for sure.
Yeah, because like yeah, even if it's compared to like what the budget of the film was, like it may not seem a lot. It's still like a good example of like you save money if you put in this work, because there's the false misconception and this myth of like it costs more to be sustainable, right? Like this people have this idea, like even non-film people and like just general life, because we're in this like consumerism like economy where it's like, oh, to be sustainable you need X, Y, and Z, you need to purchase all these fancy things. And that's why a lot of people, like I realized on my set, thought too before presenting these ideas, like you actually save money. Like there's a lot of maybe upfront costs or like investment costs, but then over time it pays back. And that's like, it's just like, doesn't matter how much money you save, even if you save like $50, that's still like you saved something, whatever size production you have too. So I think that's really inspiring too. And you did mention that you had really supportive department heads, but what about the crew? Like how did they take it when you came on board and like presented this? Like did you get pushback, or because this is like, we're talking about 2013, back
Yeah.
in the early like days of this like movement too?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there was pushback in certain areas, but I remember on that job in particular, I worked with probably the most favorite on-set dresser I've ever worked with. And for New York-based productions, the on-set waste falls to the on-set dresser, which isn't the case everywhere, but she was just such an incredible enthusiast for what we were doing, and she went out of her way to like, if the set moved slightly from like one side of the street to the next, she'd like make sure that the recycling and compost bin followed her usual trash bin. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
she didn't have to do that, but she did, because she was like, this is important to me. And so little gestures like that. And the wardrobe department on that job was also really phenomenal, and we did a lot of donations. They were composting in the office. They were willing to pilot a textile recycling program. So yeah, there were lots of different incredible crew members on that who really kind of embraced it and
Went out their way to like, yeah,
yeah,
we
exactly.
love those people.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. No, but what I remember, we talked about this too before already, but like it's just like so astonishing to me, like the work you were doing back in like 2013, so it's been like 7-8 years now, and it's like, because it's 2021 now, and it feels like, because I'm starting to do this work now, and it's still very foreign to people and very like new to people, and just to realize like how long this movement has been going on for, and even like in film it's not new yet, people are still like unaware of it. It just feels like such a slow progression. But like, what do you think about that? Like, what do you have to say about that? Because you've been working here for like doing this for like how many, 10 years now?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that if you had asked me in 2013 when I started Earth Angel, where do you think we'll be in 2021? I would have said every production will be doing this and it'll be no problem and totally normalized, which obviously isn't the case. But I don't want to discount the progress we've made, because there's a real tangible difference now when we started shows in the early days of Earth Angel between when we start them now, and just the amount of people who are like, oh, we're working on a green set, cool, bringing my reusable water bottle, going to prioritize LED lighting, going to like, there's just, it registers more with folks than I think it did previously. But I think the real challenge for us, because the nature of our industry is that we're very decentralized, and we have these major production hubs all over the world, really, largely North America, but globally. And then we have lots of different decision makers and stakeholders that come into play. And while each of them, I think, is doing really phenomenal work in addressing sustainability within their stakeholder group, I think what's really lacking right now is inter-stakeholder collaboration. And that's something that I'm really keen on helping cultivate in these coming years, because if we are going to accelerate this transition to a net zero carbon industry and meet the demands that we need to meet, that the IPCC report put out in terms of holding our warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius and so on, like that is a radical acceleration that has to happen. And we can only do that if we have all of these different stakeholders at the table,
Mm-hmm.
and really moving on that in a ambitious way. So that's what I would love to see happen, because I think there's a lot of great resources out there. There's wonderful podcasts like yours now, like lots of information sharing happening. And I'm really excited to see the sort of like next level collaboration.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And I think in addition to that, like the educational component is so like important too, like and sustainable to like movie making or just like in general to the sustainability in like movement in the film industry. And like letting go of the it is what it is and it will always stay this way mentality. How do you think like crew or just like in general people should be educating themselves and like because this is a lot of information to absorb as well, like how do we make progress in our own lives and how do you incorporate education in what you do? And
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think as individuals, I think we all have a responsibility to first and foremost be active in our communities, understand who we're electing, and are they people who are going to support
mm-hmm.
environmental conservation or a Green New Deal, or these really ambitious environmental policies that we really need to step up on. So I think that's something I'm always trying to educate myself in terms of like my elected leaders and how they're making decisions for me and my community. And I try to stay really plugged into local organizations as well that are doing this work, right? So if there is a local compost facility I can be supporting, or material reuse service, or there's a lot of green small businesses out there that need more love,
Mm-hmm.
and people need to be aware that there are alternatives to the sort of like mass shipping company and supermarket models, and real local options out there for them. And then in terms of like crew, how we educate, well, we try to bring as many resources as we can to the crew. So what I would say to crew is like, please read the resources we send you first
Yeah.
and foremost, because I know a lot of those emails just like go unopened
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes too. But then I think a lot of our crew do tend to be more environmentally conscious in their home lives and their personal lives. And then there's kind of this switch that flips when they're in work mode and they're like, well, I'm working, so I don't have time to
Yeah.
consider
Mm-hmm.
what my impact is, or am I sourcing the most sustainable products, and so on. So encouraging people to, if you already are really active environmentally in your personal life, like how can you translate some of that into your
Mm-hmm.
set or work life?
Definitely. I love that too. And like I remember even on my set I would send out like weekly or bi-weekly like newsletters just like kind of showing what the progress we've made so far and what we're doing and highlighting just achievements on set and stuff and like adding a lot of visuals and color to make it not like, oh, here's another boring thing you have to read because yeah, like crew members are getting emails like daily with like stuff that it's just too much when they're trying to work. And I think that's like also important, just like constantly like staying positive and sharing that information and then yeah, holding yourself accountable and responsible for like what you're doing too, like and I love what you said about like looking at your elected leaders too, because really understanding like the policies that are being put in place and who's fighting for these policies, it's so important, goes beyond like the work you're doing, because like you could be recycling, but if your city isn't mandating recycling, it's not going to make a bigger difference. It's just going to, it's not going to be like, I don't know, it's not going to be greater than like what you're doing, and to like have that sustainable change for like long term, like really looking at like who is in these positions in your community, no matter where you are. And that's like a very good point you made too. And so I want to ask you about, so you have this fabulous team, which I've read about and you've told me about on Earth Angel's team, and and you're growing. So where are your offices located currently? Because you started out of Brooklyn, New York, and now where are you?
Correct. Yes. So we're based out of Brooklyn, and there's 5 of us out of Brooklyn, and then we have 3 more in California, and then we also have Georgia. So really trying to be focused on the major production hubs.
Yeah.
that a lot of productions are frequenting. So that's sort of where we're concentrated for the moment.
That's amazing. And how long did it take you to like when did you open these like offices in California and in Georgia like into your career?
Yeah, so LA, we started working in LA a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And Atlanta, we had done some work in Atlanta earlier on, but we didn't really start to be active there until last year. So it's all pretty current, and it's really just about, is there an appetite
Mm-hmm.
for
Definitely.
sustainable production, and so as much as we would like to kind of roll out and have a presence and get these shows on board with sustainability, there is obviously, production has to be willing, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of times it requires lots of communication and back and forth, and why does this matter? How is it important? How do you work? What do I get out of this? All of those conversations take time, and especially because this is such a new aspect that is not always budgeted for in a production line item. Sustainability is not always a line item in production budgets. So there's some entry level issues that you have to navigate to kind of get people on board in the first place.
Yeah, no, for sure. But speaking of like that, you have eco PAs that you're always recruiting according to your website. So like, what is an eco PA? You can explain that.
Great question. So at Earth Angel, we refer to ourselves as a eco department. So we have people internally. I have an analytics manager who just focuses on our reporting and metrics. Materials manager just focusing on our sourcing, procurement options, and material recovery. Strategy manager, et cetera. So we have all these different roles around sustainability internally, and then our eco PAs are the boots on the ground people who are enacting these elements. So our team preps the whole production on how we're going to address sustainability. We line up the vendors, we line up all the ways we're going to report on the metrics. And then the eco PA is part of the shooting crew and with the shooting crew all day, every day, whenever they're filming. And so they set up our zero waste stations and oversee the elimination of single-use plastics on set. They collect a lot of the data that we end up putting into our reports at the end. And they really educate. They're a resource and an educator to the entire crew about the whole sustainable production process. So yes, we are always recruiting eco PAs. We get random requests and from all over the world, really, where people want to have a trained eco PA. So people can always apply online on our website, and we let them know when there is a new training that's going to be available, which they were in person, and now we've obviously moved all virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And we of course like sort of prioritize them around where productions sort of need them most urgently. So yeah, anyone anywhere can apply, and you never know if there's a project that is in need of an eco PA somewhere around the world, and there you go, we'll provide an Earth Angel eco PA.
That's amazing. Yes, anyone listening that's like, feeling inspired and wants to do something or wants to do like maybe is a PA already or just wants to switch a career and you want to be on set and be the green champion, definitely connect with Earth Angel. How can people connect with you and learn more about what you offer and do?
Totally. So our website is earthangel.nyc. So you can look us up there, and that's where the application form is and lots of information. And then you can also find us on social media at Earth Angel Sets, plural. Always look us up there as well.
Amazing. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just thank you so much for having me. Thank you to your listeners for who are interested in sustainable production and how they can engage in this topic. And yeah, looking forward to keeping the conversations going, and hopefully here's to a better 2021.
Yes, thank you so much for like everything that you do and have done, and like, and you know, you being so generous with your time today and sharing all this like knowledge. And again, I'm so inspired and so hopeful for the future. And thank you everyone listening to this episode. So remember to check out Earth Angel's website and social media. It'll all be linked below. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review, because it's free and it helps the show. And visit our website, thesustainableact.com, where we'll be sharing more resources and tips, and we'll post about Earth Angel. And yeah, if you ever have any questions or any interest about sustainable production, you can reach out to myself or to Emellie. And like what you said, Emellie, just keep the conversation going. Like, action inspires action. And yeah, here's to working towards a greener future. Thank you.